I don't have slides, primarily because of this tweet here, which you can see it was a couple days ago. So I set out to hand code my slides again, and I realized there's a reason why I stopped doing that a long time ago. So Ken Wheeler, if you ever see this, I am cursing your name, but I don't have any slides for you today. I do actually have a demo that I need everybody's help with, though. So you can all get out your phones, and we're going to do a little fun thing here. So I created a little game, or I guess it's more like interactive art, if you will. And we'll see if it actually works. So that's the other part of it. Can you actually scan the code? Does it work from there? I try to make it kind of big. So if you scan that, you're going to start to notice that you're going to be asked for your name. And then after you are asked for your name, you're going to be asked for your favorite shape. And then after you ask for your favorite shape, you're going to be asked for your favorite color. And when you start pressing on the colors, what you're going to see is we actually start to get some of these shapes popping up. And there's something that's a little bit hard to see. I don't know where I placed my, my laser pointer, so maybe this one's got a pointer on it. Let me have a look at that. Does that have a laser? It's like a red line on there. Yeah, we do. So you're going to see up here, if you can kind of tell, there's like a huge stack of things like building up now. It's like coming off the page now, so it's just going to roll off. And it's going to actually break the canvas here. I'm going to refresh the page. We're going to see something else happen here. I'm changing the cursor for where this bit of data here at the top is actually checking for new data. But this data is still representative of all the players we actually have. So every time you actually change the colors, it is giving me a real-time state of the updating data. But what's happening up here is I'm getting a stream of every delta change that's actually occurring. And so my talk today is actually about the two different kinds of GraphQL subscriptions that we support in Hasura, and just even in general about how we can actually kind of rethink this paradigm. I'm going to be refreshing constantly because I didn't actually handle the overflow. But what we have is we have two paradigms where, and they really do break down into an idea of a stateful subscription that we call live queries, and one that we call the streaming events. And so with streaming events, every database event that occurs compared to the cursor we give it, in my case an updated at timeline, versus a static query of just what is the current status, gives us a really interesting different ways of querying the data. If you think about looking at the different kinds of data we'd want to track, if I had one person counting is the light on or off, and one person counting how many times I've turned the light on or off, we have two very, very different bits of data that we actually want to track, and depending upon what you're wanting to be doing with that data has different value. Now, with inside of Hasura, I was told apparently I guess I'm the vendor talk, so I get to actually push Hasura a little bit more. I want to be careful because this is about subscriptions, but what's also interesting is we're actually able to do some cool stuff like changing permissions built in. So I've got a couple of different authorized tokens here. And I've got one here where now we're only going to actually see just the green shapes. So anytime somebody changes their shape to green, we'll see that. But I'm also only limited to the green color changes happening in my stream. So depending upon the kind of permissions that I want to apply to a specific JWT token, I can say, well, this person is subscribed to only this channel of updates, and this person is subscribed to only this channel of updates. And I could actually be able to have the ability to go back in time based on a cursor that I'm controlling as a user way back and actually see all of the updates that occur to a specific stream from the time that my cursor dictates. So that's what's actually happening when I refresh the page. It's getting the current timestamp, which resets the actual cursor of real-time data that I'd want to get. If I were to give this a cursor from 2 days ago, when I was madly testing this, we would get a flood of data coming in all at once. And so it's a really interesting way to actually work with your content. We can kind of look at how the code actually looks. Under the hood, it's actually not that fancy, right? So here's a typical GraphQL subscription. Let me see if I can boost the font size on that a little bit. And I'm going to hide that messy sidebar there. So that's like a regular subscription that most people who know GraphQL actually have worked with. So let's go ahead and actually go for my message stream here. So now we're going to do some fancy coding here. Sorry about that. So let's look at the message stream here. So the only thing that I really had to do was just put _stream on the end. And then I had to change a few things, right? So I now have like a batch size. I have to determine what size of batches I want to actually stream that data in with. I have something like the cursor, which is going to be what I'm actually trying to track. In this case, it's going to be my updated at value on my database. But beyond that, that's all I need to actually implement a really complex feature that actually has a lot of benefits for us. So you may have heard there's going to be some new changes to the GraphQL spec, things like @stream, which is the thing we hear the most that's being compared to. The biggest difference is that @stream is actually server dependent, right? So the server is going to be sending batches of data to your client based on its own choice of when that data becomes available. With this one, I as the client get to choose when that data actually becomes available to me. So I could say, as a client, I want to configure everything from when I was last online. Maybe I'm off in the mountains or something and I want to get the message queue streamed in after I go back on connectivity. So as a client, I get to control the actual ownership of the stream. And that's something that WebSockets give us that the @stream won't be able to handle very well. So it's a pretty simplistic demo. We can go back to see how badly the UI is blown up here. And I wanted to kind of show, if I've got a few more minutes here, just a little bit how we can kind of compound on here. So I only have a couple of different tokens here to pass in. I've got this generic one. I have this only green one. And then I wanted to see if we could actually modify the permissions for a only circles, because shapes and colors are about as complex as my brain can think tonight. So we're going to go over to our system. I do have slides if there's some technical questions. We could go over it, but they're Google Slides, and they're very, very boring. So we'll try to avoid them if possible. Here we have the actual data. I'm going to go ahead and grab a token. So I've done the thing that you're not supposed to do, and I've hard-coded my tokens here inside of my code. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple of my tokens here to have a look at. And that is going to be inside of my header. And that's inside of my role switcher here. All right, so dynamic role switcher. We're going to have a quick look at that. And so my only circles token, we're going to grab this here. We're going to bring this inside of Hasura and have a look at what it actually looks like. So if you haven't seen the Hasura interface, here you go. I'm going to go ahead and pass in the authorization here. This is a lot harder with one hand, actually. I should have taken you up on the mic stand. I'm going to go ahead and actually decode this JWT here. So we'll see if you can tell there that we've basically got a role of shape, and we have another value coming in off the JWT called circle. So it's like, this is the shape that I want. So what we want to do is actually put some permission controls for this role that's going to limit my selection based only on if I actually am fetching for circles. So let's go ahead and have a look at how we would do that. I'm going to go ahead and go to my tables here. This is just a Postgres database. Actually, this is using Neon, which is the new integration we launched today. So please promote us on Product Hunt. We would appreciate it. But I'm going to go ahead and go to the Canvas messages here. And this is just a channel subscription kind of concept. I'm going to go ahead and go to permissions. And so I have a role here for not a shape yet, so we'll make a new role. And we'll say whenever that role shape comes in, we're going to put a select permission on here. And we're going to say with a custom check, and that's going to be when the shape of that message actually matches to, and it was going to be the X or a shape. So it's going to be if the shape happens to equal circle, then we'll be able to limit that down to just, wow, I can't really type from this distance. Okay. Yeah, I think that's how we had that. And we'll say, you know what, they can go ahead and select all the columns. That's fine. And I'll need to do some aggregates allowed because I have some counting things going on. And I think I need to give that role permission to my canvas, if I recall right. So we'll go ahead and go to permissions. And I'll say that my shape person needs to be able to select from here. So we'll say, without any checks in this case, we'll go ahead and toggle all, because we play willy-nilly with permissions when we're in DevRel. And then we're going to go with the user table here to give that one last little bit. Make sure I'm not missing any data, because GraphQL is very good at crashing on you if you actually don't give it the permissions that it needs. I'm going to go ahead and go to the shape role again, and we're going to select that. And so, theoretically, if this worked, we're going to go ahead and say, without any checks, toggle all, and we're going to go ahead and hit save permissions. And we'll head back to that demo here and see. So now if I refresh the page here one more time, so we'll look at we're on the only green one. We'll go back to generic so we can kind of see what it looks like to fetch all the data again. And now we're going to need some more activity here. If we go to only circles, we've got the shapes, and now we should also see only the people that have shape objects. When you update your colors, then we'll only actually see your events streaming across the top. If anybody who's a shape circle wants to update, if it worked. There we go, there's a circle. Because there's some circles, they're coming in. All right, so, and you can see how that's just a really powerful way to work, is that this actually allows you to have this idea of messages and channels and being able to work with really fine-grained permissions that otherwise would be relatively complex to set up. If there's some technical questions about it, I'm happy to answer those. Some of the things we had to address were issues like back pressure. So one of the ways that we solve that at Hasura is we actually, if you're not familiar with how Hasura works under the hood, what we do is we take the GraphQL query, we transform it to GraphQL to SQL, and then we execute that against your database. And when it comes to the idea of multiple subscriptions, we stress tested this up to over 1 million active connections. And that was a really big bill. But when you stress test it to that level, you actually have a lot of independent cursors being tracked on the database to say, okay, when was the last time this client needs to be getting its data? And so what we were able to do is we actually batch process in the same part where we do the authentication checking. We say, okay, all of these clients are actually asking for the same cursor or the same time window, and we're able to actually batch process multiple fetches for multiple clients, and then stream those back out to the people asking for them. Instead of having individual queries against the database, we're able to actually sort of, I guess hyperplex might be the right description. But it's a really interesting use case, and we did stress it to over 1 million active connections. It is live now. It's in the open source version as well as on the cloud version, so you can absolutely go and test it out. But this is kind of what I wanted to show you, was this functionality between streaming versus stateful. All this data up here is stateful, all this data down here is streaming. And you can see that the real benefit there is that instead of having to send potentially thousands and thousands of records every half second that a WebSocket is pinging the server, I can actually just send the one bit of data that's changed over and over, as opposed to having to send a massive payload down the server. So yeah, that's the demo. Are there any questions?
Do we have any questions? What I really liked is that you were able to express a bit of like business logic just using the headers and the configuration in the panel. Like, was the permission thing from like Postgres, or this is part of Hasura engine basically?
That's a Hasura thing. So we have an RBAC system where we can get really fine-grained on the permissions, especially with GraphQL. You can actually use relationship-based permissions. So you could say the permission of these two, like to access this row is based on this other table that has a relationship to that table. And that's the kind of expressiveness that GraphQL gives us that's really great for, especially with permissions, yeah.
Yeah, it would be great to see this example that we talked about before your presentation, actually, because we are chatting about use case for Hasura, that if you have a e-commerce site, as we like built at Sailor, for example, you could use that to build this feature where you can show like how many people are now viewing, this product, or like some live updates to the product page. So actually, I would like to try this out. Is this like demo open and like?
It will be open once I remove those tokens out of the code base. Actually, it is open. It's on my GitHub repo. It's rather messy, but I think it's the Wroclaw event flow, so it's a free database. If you break it, then I'm not too sad.
Yeah, we have one question.
So yeah, another question related to what is on the part of Hasura and what is handled by SQL. So the event stream, the event history, this history of changes which were done on the DB, it's stored on the Hasura side. Yeah, of course, there's no way to get this from PostgreSQL, like get the history of the inserts, or how do you do it? Or?
So it is on the Postgres database, but we have to use some special code on the Hasura side to actually interpret what was the change diff based on the cursor. Mm-hmm. So the same thing for subscriptions. We're using built-in Postgres functionality to be able to look at the change log. But when it comes to the streaming bits, we actually have to do some diffing on the server to say, okay, this is the latest delta that goes down.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for the questions. Any other? If not, then thank you, Jesse, for the presentation. Please, big applause for Jesse.